Have you ever imagined what it would be like to discover who is really by your side when everything seems to fall apart? I found out in the worst possible way, but also the most revealing. My name is Nathaniel Harwick. I'm 37 years old. And this is the story of how I won $143 million in the Mega Millions and decided to hide it from everyone to do the most painful test of my life. Before starting the story, subscribe to the channel and comment below. What would you do if you won the lottery? My life in Portland, Oregon was what you could call mediocrely stable. I had been working for 14 years as a quality supervisor at Cascade Manufacturing, an automotive components company that was 40 minutes from home when traffic cooperated. My salary of $62,000 annually allowed me to live comfortably in a 2-bedroom house in the Sellwood neighborhood. But comfortably meant paying the bills, shopping at Safeway with discount coupons, and maybe dining out once a month at Applebee's. My wife, Evangeline, worked part-time as a dental assistant at Dr. Morrison's clinic. She always dreamed of going back to college and finishing the nursing degree she abandoned when we got married 15 years ago. One day, she always said, when we have enough money for me not to have to work while I study. I always agreed, knowing that this one day seemed increasingly distant. We didn't have children. We tried for years, went through expensive treatments that drained savings and hopes at the same time. After 4 frustrated attempts at in vitro fertilization, we decided to stop. The silence that settled in our house after that decision was deafening. Evangeline became more distant, spending hours browsing Pinterest, saving photos of baby rooms we would never decorate. My younger brother, Jeremiah, was everything I couldn't manage to be. A graduate in business administration from the University of Oregon, he worked for a tech startup in Seattle and earned twice what I earned. Whenever he visited us, he arrived driving a different Tesla. Company car, he explained with a smile. He couldn't hide his pride. He had a new girlfriend every 6 months, all young, successful and with that sparkle in their eyes that only comes from those who still believe the world has infinite possibilities. Nate, you need to take more risks, he always said during our family gatherings. Leave that dead-end job and come to Seattle. I can get you an interview at my company. I always changed the subject, but inside I felt that familiar pang of inadequacy. My parents, Harold and Beatrice Harwick, were in their 70s and struggling to maintain the 2-story house where I grew up in Beaverton. Dad had severe arthritis in his hands. Decades working as a mechanic took their toll. Mom was developing early signs of dementia, forgetting names and repeating the same stories 3 times in the same conversation. They were too proud to accept financial help, even when I discreetly offered to pay for a caregiver or home repairs. The only thing that kept me sane were my work friends and our Thursday poker group. There was Maxwell Trudeau, process engineer who always had a dirty joke up his sleeve, Benjamin Ashworth, shipping manager who collected vintage cars he never managed to finish restoring, and Clayton Whitmore, financial analyst who gave us investment tips that inevitably resulted in losses. We met in Maxwell's garage every week, betting ridiculously low amounts, $5, $10 at most, and complaining about our lives while drinking warm Budweiser beer. It was during one of those nights that Clayton started talking about lottery. You guys know that the probability of winning the Mega Millions is 1 in 300 million, right? But someone always wins. Why can't it be us? We started doing a weekly pool. Each one contributed $5, and Clayton bought the tickets at the Texaco convenience store on the company's corner. We chose the numbers together, anniversary dates, lucky numbers. Sometimes we let the machine choose randomly. It was more a social tradition than a serious attempt to get rich. A way to dream collectively for a few minutes before returning to our predictable lives. For 2 years, we lost religiously every week. $20 a month that I could have used for other things, but justified as cheap entertainment. Evangeline thought it was foolish, but never complained openly. At least you're not spending on beer or cigarettes, she said. It was a Friday, March 23rd. I remember perfectly because it was my grandfather's death anniversary, Theodore Harwick, a man who worked 70 hours a week his whole life and died 3 months after retiring, never having had the chance to enjoy what he built. I was particularly melancholic that day, thinking about how our family life seemed to follow the same pattern of sacrifice without reward. Evangeline had gone out to dinner with work friends, something about celebrating one of their promotions. I was alone at home, watching a documentary on the History Channel about World War II, when I remembered I hadn't checked Tuesday's lottery numbers. Usually Clayton sent us a message in the WhatsApp group with the results, but this time he hadn't sent anything. I took the ticket from the dresser drawer, where I always kept it, and opened the Oregon Lottery website on my Dell laptop that was over 6 years old. The numbers appeared on the screen: 14, 28, 35, 41, 52, Megaball 17. I looked at the ticket. Then I looked again at the screen. Then at the ticket. My heart started beating strangely, as if it had lost its rhythm. 14, 28, 35, 41, 52, Megaball 17. They were exactly the same numbers. I got up from the armchair so fast I almost tripped on the living room rug. I went to the kitchen, turned on all the lights, put the ticket on the counter and checked again, number by number, as if it were a sacred ritual. There was no doubt. We had won $143 million. My first reaction wasn't joy or euphoria. It was pure panic. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the ticket. I thought about calling Evangeline immediately, then the poker guys, then my parents. I picked up the phone 3 times and hung up before even dialing. Then something strange happened. A voice in my head. Maybe my grandfather, Theodore's voice, who was always skeptical about people, told me, "Wait, Nathaniel. Think carefully before telling anyone." I stayed awake all night, walking around the house, looking at the ticket every 5 minutes to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Evangeline arrived around 1 in the morning, slightly drunk, complaining that Sarah, the promoted friend, was acting better than all the others. She found me in the kitchen, drinking my 5th cup of coffee. "Why are you awake?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, throwing her purse on the sofa. "Couldn't sleep," I lied. "I was thinking about work." She shrugged and went to the bedroom. 5 minutes later, she was already snoring softly. During the first 72 hours after discovering we had won, I lived in a state of absolute paralysis. I couldn't eat, could barely sleep, and every casual conversation with Evangeline or work colleagues seemed loaded with hidden meaning. I observed their expressions, analyzed every word, looking for signs of how they would react when they found out about the money. On Monday, Clayton finally sent the message to the group. "We lost again, guys. But don't give up. Luck will turn eventually." He had no idea that the ticket was kept in my drawer, already photographed and digitized in 3 different locations for security. It was at that moment that a dark idea began to form in my mind. An idea that scared me with its simplicity and cruelty. What if I tested everyone before revealing the prize? What if I found out who really cared about me when they thought I was in trouble, instead of when they knew I was rich? I spent 2 weeks planning. I discreetly consulted a lawyer specialized in lotteries in downtown Portland, a stern man named Reginald Blackstone, who explained all the procedures to claim the prize anonymously. "Many winners do this through trusts," he explained. "It protects your identity and your family from unwanted visitors." During those 2 weeks, I started observing behaviors I had never noticed before. Evangeline constantly complained about money, but always found ways to buy unnecessary things. A new set of towels, expensive beauty products, shoes she would maybe wear twice. When I gently questioned these expenses, she got irritated. "I work too, Nathaniel." "I have the right to spend my own money," Jeremiah called during this period, as he did every month, always with the same condescending tone. "Hey brother, still at that factory? You know the offer for Seattle is still standing, right? Of course, you'd have to start in a lower position." But with time, I could hear the traffic noise in the background. He was in the new BMW he had mentioned in the last call. My parents continued refusing my help. When I offered to pay for a technician to fix the heater that was failing, Dad turned red with anger. "Nathaniel, we're not indigents. We've been able to take care of our own house for 50 years. We're not going to stop now." Mom tried to soften it, but I saw the stubborn pride in her eyes, too. The poker guys continued with the same complaints as always. Maxwell complained that his wife wouldn't let him buy a new drill. Benjamin sighed about how he never managed to finish restoring the '69 Chevelle. Clayton gave contradictory financial advice while admitting his own savings account had less than $1,000. That's when I realized they all lived trapped in their little boxes of dissatisfaction, each blaming external circumstances for not getting what they wanted. And I knew that if I told them about the lottery at that moment, I would instantly become the solution to all their problems, or the target of all their resentments. In the first week of May, I implemented my plan. It was risky and probably cruel, but I needed to know. I started spreading subtle rumors about possible layoffs at Cascade Manufacturing. It wasn't a complete lie. The company really was going through difficulties, and there were talks about budget cuts. I just amplified the situation. I let slip to Maxwell that my supervisor, Robert Henley, had commented about departmental restructuring. I mentioned to Benjamin that I saw documents about human resource optimization on the general manager's desk. To Clayton, I confided that I was worried because my department was considered redundant by executives. For 2 weeks, I carefully fed this narrative. I arrived at work with a worried expression, obsessively checked email, sighed deeply during casual conversations. Evangeline noticed my change in behavior. "You're acting strange, Nathaniel." "Quieter than normal. Did something happen at work?" "Nothing specific," I replied, avoiding eye contact. "Just some rumors about cuts." "You know how it is this time of year," she frowned. "Cuts? What kind of cuts?" "Probably nothing," I lied. "But the company isn't doing well. Asian competition is killing our market." I saw worry pass through her eyes, quickly followed by something that looked like irritation. "Well, if something happens, you'll have to find another job quickly. We can't be without your income." I noticed she didn't ask how I was feeling about the possibility of losing a job I'd had for 14 years. The first concern was financial. The following Thursday, during poker, I decided to accelerate the test. It was time for the big lie. "Guys," I began, forcing my voice to tremble slightly, "I need to tell you something." All three stopped looking at their cards and focused on me. The silence in Maxwell's garage was broken only by the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. I lost my job today. The reaction was immediate and revealing. Maxwell dropped his cards on the table with a thud. "Damn, Nate! Seriously?" "Robert Henley called me into his office at 3 this afternoon." I continued the lie, each word carefully rehearsed. "Said it was a board decision, nothing personal. Budget cuts. 14 years thrown in the trash." Benjamin shook his head slowly. "Man, what a situation." "And now?" "I don't know," I replied, letting my voice break a little. "I have some savings, but not much. Maybe 2-3 months of expenses if we cut all unnecessary spending." Clayton, always the financial expert, leaned forward. "Nate, you need to think strategically. First, register for unemployment insurance immediately. Second, start looking for a job tomorrow. The market for quality supervisors is tight, but not impossible." "Yeah," I agreed. "But it won't be easy to find something that pays the same." There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Maxwell said, "Look, if you need anything, not much, but maybe I could lend a couple $100 until you get back on your feet." My heart warmed a little. Maxwell, who always complained about not having money to buy tools, was offering real help. Benjamin nodded. "I can help with something too. Not much, but we're friends, right?" Clayton, on the other hand, became visibly uncomfortable. "Of course, if I could help, I would help, but you guys know my financial situation. Between the mortgage, Jennifer's car payment, and Madison's piano lessons." He gestured vaguely, as if his obligations were too obvious to enumerate. Interesting. The man who always bragged about his investment strategies and gave financial advice didn't offer concrete help. We decided to end the game early that night. When I got home, Evangeline was watching Netflix in bed, wearing a new silk pajama I didn't remember seeing before. "How was poker?" she asked without taking her eyes off the screen. I told the guys about work. "What work?" "Did something happen?" I took a deep breath. It was time for the ultimate test. "They fired me today, Evangeline." The remote control fell from her hand. "What? What do you mean they fired you?" I repeated the same story I had told my friends, observing every micro-expression on my wife's face. I saw shock, then fear, then something that chilled my blood, anger. "Nathaniel, how did you let this happen?" Her voice had an accusatory tone I had never heard before. 14 years at the company and they just fire you? You didn't do anything to protect yourself? What do you mean I did something? It was budget cuts. There was nothing I could do. She got up from the bed, starting to pace around the room. I always told you that you were too comfortable in that job. You never tried to get a promotion, never took courses, never stood out. And now look where we are. Each word was a stab. My wife of 15 years was blaming me for something I supposedly had no control over. Evangeline, I just lost my job today. Aren't you going to ask how I'm feeling? She stopped walking and looked at me as if I were naive. How you're feeling doesn't pay the bills, Nathaniel. I'm 29 years old, work part-time earning a pittance, and now my husband is unemployed. How do you think I feel? 29 years old. She was 34. Even in anger, she was lying about her age. That night, we lay on opposite sides of the king-size bed, each lost in our own thoughts. Me pretending to be devastated by job loss, she probably calculating our financial situation and wondering if she had married the wrong man. The following days were a masterclass in human behavior. It was as if the news of my supposed dismissal was a chemical reagent that revealed the true nature of each person around me. Jeremiah called 2 days later. Nate, I heard from Mom that you lost your job. Man, what a situation. There was something in his tone, not exactly satisfaction, but a confirmation of his suspicions about my stagnant life. Look, I know I've offered before, but Seattle really could be a fresh start for you. Of course, you'd have to move, leave your comfort zone, except starting in a junior position. Junior position. I was 37 years old with 14 years of experience. And my younger brother was suggesting I start as a trainee at his tech company. I'll think about it, I replied. Don't take too long to think, brother. The job market is competitive. The longer you stay idle, the worse it looks on your resume. My parents reacted differently, but equally revealingly. Mom called, crying. Nathaniel, my son, what are you going to do? You have bills to pay, mortgage. Dad took the phone from her. Son, I know things are difficult, but don't accept any job desperately. You have experience, you have value. Don't sell yourself short. It was interesting how even in their genuine concern, they didn't offer practical help, Mom suggested. I talked to Pastor Williams from church. He knows many people in town, but didn't mention the possibility of me temporarily moving to their house if necessary. Evangeline's reaction developed over an entire week, like a slow infection. On the first day, there was only anger at the situation. On the second day, she started making comments about my life decisions. On the third day, she suggested I should maybe take advantage of this opportunity to completely rethink my career. What do you mean by that? I asked. Nathaniel, you're 37 years old. If you're going to start over, maybe it's time to do something more ambitious. Your brother is right about Seattle. Do you want to move to Seattle? She hesitated. Well, it's a bigger city. More opportunities. For both of us. As if my professional situation were a prison, keeping her dreams captive. At the end of the first week, she let slip what she was really thinking. We were shopping at Safeway, and I was being particularly careful with prices. Putting some items back on the shelves as a responsible unemployed person would do. God. Nathaniel, look how we're living, she murmured when I put back a package of frozen salmon, counting pennies like indigents. Evangeline, I lost my job a week ago. It's sensible for us to cut unnecessary expenses. Is that what I've become to you? An unnecessary expense? That's not what I had said, but the projection was revealing. That night, she spent hours on the phone with her sister Jennifer, who lived in San Diego and was married to a successful real estate broker. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I caught fragments. I don't know how long I can live like this. I always knew he lacked ambition. Maybe it's time to rethink some things. Apparently, 15 years of marriage fell into the some things category. The second week of my unemployment was when things really deteriorated. Evangeline started going out more frequently, girls' nights out, that lasted until very late. She always came back with elaborate excuses about where they were. Who said what? How time flew by. One Thursday, she came home at 2 a.m. with eyes that were too bright and a smile that didn't match our supposedly desperate financial situation. Where were you until this hour? I asked when she entered the bedroom, trying not to make noise. I told you I was with the girls. We went to that new bar in the Pearl District. Pearl District. One of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. Not exactly the place where an unemployed dental assistant would go drinking during a family financial crisis. How much did you spend? The question visibly irritated her. Nathaniel, we're not beggars. I can have a few drinks with my friends without having to account for every penny. But 2 nights later, when I wanted to order pizza for dinner because I was too tired to cook, she said we couldn't afford delivery food. The contradiction was glaring. That's when I started noticing other details. The new perfume she was using, it wasn't cheap. The freshly done nails every week, even when we allegedly were cutting expenses. The way she obsessively checked her phone and always left it face down when she was near me. But the most painful revelation came from my poker friends. Maxwell called me on Wednesday of the 2nd week. Nate, I need to tell you something kind of awkward. What's up? Clayton is spreading a story about you. My stomach contracted. What kind of story? He's saying you're lying about being fired. That actually you were dismissed for cause and you're hiding it from everyone. Blood rushed to my head. He said that based on what? Apparently he called a friend who knows someone at Cascade Manufacturing. Said he checked discreetly and nobody was fired recently. Of course, nobody had been fired, because I was never fired. But Clayton, instead of supporting me as a friend, had decided to investigate my story like a private detective. Maxwell, do you believe him? There was an uncomfortable pause. Look, man, I don't know what to believe. But if you're lying about this, why? It doesn't make sense. It really didn't make sense. How could I explain that I was testing everyone's loyalty around me without sounding completely insane? I'm not lying, Maxwell. I don't know what information Clayton's friend received, but I'm telling you the truth. Okay, man. I just thought you should know what's being said. After I hung up, I stood looking at the lottery ticket I kept in the drawer. $143 million. Enough money to solve all the problems of everyone around me. And instead, I was watching my social life crumble because of an elaborate lie. But the lie was revealing truths I never would have discovered otherwise. That night, I confronted Evangeline about her constant outings. You're acting strangely, I said, when she was getting ready to go out again. The 4th time that week. Strange how? Going out all the time, spending money we supposedly don't have, coming home late. She stopped applying lipstick and looked at me through the mirror. Nathaniel, just because you lost your job doesn't mean my social life has to end. It's not that. It's that you seem, I don't know, different. More distant, she turned to face me. You want to know the truth? I'm suffocated in this house. 15 years married to a man who never had real ambition, who settled for a mediocre job until getting fired, who never gave me the children I wanted. And now, when we should be facing this together, you want to control me even in my few sources of happiness. Each word was precise and brutal, but one caught my special attention. The children you wanted? Evangeline, you said you had accepted our situation. I lied. The answer came without hesitation. I lied because I didn't want to seem like a bitter woman. But the truth is, I still think about it every day. And now I'm 34 years old without children, married to an unemployed man, and my biological window is closing. 34. At least she stopped lying about her age. If you feel this way, why didn't we ever talk about this honestly? Because talking doesn't change our financial situation, Nathaniel. Talking doesn't pay for treatments. Talking doesn't buy a bigger house in a better neighborhood where I wouldn't be embarrassed to invite people. It was as if she had kept a list of resentments for years and finally found the perfect excuse to dump it all. So, you want a divorce? I asked directly. She hesitated. I want a different life. It wasn't exactly an answer, but it was enough information. Exactly 3 weeks had passed since I started my social experiment when I decided I had enough data. The person I thought I knew as my wife was clearly considering leaving what she perceived as a failed marriage. My brother saw my situation as confirmation of his theories about my lack of ambition. My parents, despite genuine concern, didn't offer practical support. Clayton had become an amateur investigator trying to prove I was a liar, while Maxwell and Benjamin, despite their financial limitations, offered real help. It was time to reveal the truth. I scheduled separate meetings with each important person in my life. I would start with work friends, then family, and lastly, Evangeline. The following Thursday, I called Maxwell, Benjamin, and Clayton for a meeting in the same garage where we played poker. I said I had something important to tell them. Clayton arrived with an "I knew it" expression that deeply irritated me. "Guys," I began, "do you remember the lottery ticket we bought 3 weeks ago?" "Of course," said Maxwell. Clayton said we lost again. I looked directly at Clayton. Actually, we didn't lose. I took the ticket from my pocket and put it on the game table. "We won $143 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Maxwell looked alternately at me and the ticket as if it were an elaborate joke. Benjamin picked up the ticket and kept studying the numbers. Clayton was white as paper. "You're kidding," Maxwell finally said. "I'm not. We won the Mega Millions 3 weeks ago, and I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to do a test." "What kind of test?" Clayton's voice came out strangled. "I wanted to find out who really cared about me when they thought I was in trouble, instead of when they knew I was rich." Benjamin dropped the ticket on the table. "So you were never fired?" "No, I lied about that. Sorry, but I needed to know." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, processing the information. "Man, this is insane. But wait, does this mean we're all rich?" "We're partners in the tickets, so yes. After taxes and dividing by 4, each one gets approximately $26 million. Clayton finally found his voice. "Nathaniel, you lied to all of us for 3 weeks. Made us worry about you, offer help we could barely give. And you investigated my story behind my back as if I were a criminal," I replied. "Called strangers questioning my honesty instead of simply supporting me as a friend." He had no answer for that. Maxwell, always the most direct in the group, asked the obvious question. "So? Who passed your test?" I looked at the 3 men I had known for years. "You two," I said, pointing to Maxwell and Benjamin, "offered real help even having little to give. That means something to me." Clayton turned red. I explained my financial situation. "Clayton, you always bragged about your financial knowledge and your investment strategies. But when a friend needed help, suddenly you became poor. And instead of trusting me, you decided to investigate if I was lying." The tension in the garage was palpable. Maxwell tried to ease it. "Man, this is a lot of money." "A lot, but don't you think you could have found out these things without lying to everyone?" He was right, and I knew it. Maybe. But how many times in life do we have the opportunity to see how people really are when they think we have nothing to offer? We spent the next 2 hours talking about legal procedures, how to claim the prize, tax issues. Clayton gradually returned to normal, his financial consultant instincts overcoming embarrassment. Benjamin could barely process the numbers. He kept repeating 26 million like a mantra. Maxwell was the most pragmatic. "Nate, I know you wanted to do your test, but I hope you now tell your wife. She must be terrified thinking you guys are going to lose the house." That was it. It was time for the most difficult conversation. I came home that night knowing it would be our most important conversation in 15 years of marriage. Evangeline was in the kitchen, preparing a simple salad, another forced economy she blamed on me. "How was the meeting with the guys?" she asked without looking up from the cutting board. "Revealing," I replied. "Evangeline, I need to tell you something." The tone of my voice made her stop cutting tomatoes. "What now, Nathaniel?" I took a deep breath. "I was never fired," she frowned. "What do you mean?" "I lied about losing my job. And I lied because we won the lottery." The knife fell from her hand with a metallic sound against the counter. "What did you say?" I explained everything. The winning ticket, the decision to hide it, the test I elaborated, everyone's reactions. With each sentence, I saw a different emotion passing through her face. Shock, confusion, anger, and finally, something that looked like relief. When I finished, she was silent for long minutes, just looking at me as if seeing me for the first time. $143 million, she finally repeated. Divided by 4, but yes. "And you hid this from me for 3 weeks?" "Yes. To test if I loved you when you didn't have money." That was part of it. She leaned against the kitchen counter, processing. "And what was the result of your test, Nathaniel?" The question was loaded with implications. We both knew what the result had been. "I found out you were considering leaving me Because you thought I was a financial failure. There was no denial. Just a long sigh. And I found out, I continued, that you've been lying about many things. Your age, your feelings about us not having children, your satisfaction with our marriage, Nathaniel. And I found out that in the last weeks, while you thought we were broke, you found ways to justify expenses on things for yourself, but complained when I wanted to order a pizza. She closed her eyes. You're right. The admission caught me by surprise. I expected denial, justifications, anger. I'm right about what? About everything. She opened her eyes and looked at me directly. I was considering leaving you, and I was exploring other options. That explained the night outings and phone secrecy. For how long? 6 months, maybe more, before even the dismissal story. My supposedly desperate financial situation just accelerated a process that was already underway. Why? Because I felt trapped, Nathaniel. Trapped in a life that wasn't what I imagined at 20. And I know this hurts you, but it's the truth. At least now she was being honest. And now? I asked. Now that you know about the money? She hesitated. This changes everything, doesn't it? Should it change? I don't know. She ran her hands through her hair. I don't know if I can pretend the last 3 weeks didn't happen. I don't know if I can pretend you didn't find out who I really am when I thought there was no hope. It was the most honest answer she had given me in years. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from the porch of my new house in Bend, Oregon. It's a smaller, quieter city, surrounded by mountains and lakes. I bought a 15-acre property with a view of the Cascade Mountains, far enough from civilization to have peace, but close enough not to feel isolated. Evangeline and I divorced amicably. She kept half of my $26 million, approximately $13 million, after taxes and legal fees. More than enough for her to start the new life she always wanted. I heard she moved to San Diego near her sister and is studying nursing at San Diego State University. Sometimes we still talk by text message. There's no bitterness between us, just recognition that we were different people who wanted different things from life. Maxwell used his money to buy a mechanic shop and is happier than I've ever seen him. Benjamin finally finished restoring the Chevelle and bought 3 other classic cars to work on. They're still my closest friends, and we meet once a month to fish in the lakes near my property. Clayton revealed himself to be exactly who I suspected he was. He tried to sue me, claiming I had illegally manipulated the lottery situation. The lawsuit came to nothing but revealed his true character. He spent most of his money on risky investments that were recommended to him by financial consultants smarter than him. I heard he lost almost everything in a cryptocurrency scheme. My parents finally accepted help. I paid for professional caregivers for Mom and completely renovated their house. Dad resisted at first, but when I explained that the money literally made no difference in my financial life, he gave in. It's just to make sure you're comfortable, I said. They're still proud, but now they're proud and well cared for. Jeremiah had the most interesting reaction of all. When I told him about the lottery, he was genuinely happy for me. But also, for the first time in his life, he stopped giving me unsolicited advice about career and ambition. Now our conversations are more balanced, more respectful. I discovered I like my brother much more when he doesn't feel superior to me. As for me, I continue working, not at Cascade Manufacturing. I left there 2 weeks after revealing the truth about the lottery. But I opened a small quality consulting company for local businesses. I work when I want, with whom I want, on projects that interest me. The lottery money gave me something worth more than material goods, freedom of choice. I learned that money doesn't change who you fundamentally are, but reveals who you really were all along. And it reveals who other people really are too. Some people become better versions of themselves when financial pressure is removed. Others reveal aspects of their personality they preferred to keep hidden. Was the test I did cruel? Probably, but was it necessary? For me, yes. I discovered truths about my life and relationships that I never would have discovered otherwise. And these truths, as painful as they were, allowed me to make decisions based on reality instead of illusions. Would I do everything the same way again? Honestly, I don't know, but I don't regret the choices I made. The money gave me a second chance to live life on my own terms, surrounded by people who care about me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. And that, I discovered, is true wealth. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment. What would you do if you won the lottery? And from which city and country are you watching?